Welcome to today's Table Talks. My name is Scott Kappelman, and I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Clark McGehee and Tyce Lawbinger. Clark, how are you?
I'm feeling great today.
You are feeling great.
Yeah, I'm just
right
laughing.
Before we started recording this, you tried to imitate me with the start of the show, the podcast, whatever you want to call it. It was
That's
pretty
right.
funny.
I think I'm pretty good at it, honestly.
Yeah, you could take over.
Welcome to today's Table Talks. And
There you go. See, I can become a co-host and you
Right.
can take the lead role.
No, I don't mind.
That's okay.
You do more of the studying before we get started, too.
I don't know if I'd say that, but that's okay. Tyce, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm a little hurt. I've just been informed that I am non-confrontational. I thought I was a little more confrontational than what I was.
Oh,
But
yeah. We all went to lunch together
We did.
today, and we had a little situation where I didn't get something on the menu I thought I should have been able to get because the girl wouldn't let me order it. And then the manager came by, and I just asked a simple question. Is that still on the menu? Can I still do it? And so Rob felt like the two of you were a little nervous with that comment that I made to the manager. But he said, yes, you should have been able to do that.
He did, yeah.
you did?
So we
Alright.
know when we go back, I can get that particular menu item.
That's right.
Which is great.
And
And the people watching this are thinking, why does that matter to today's topic? And it doesn't.
it doesn't at all.
I wonder.
We have no good segue that's coming up. We're
Not
just
a
talking.
one. That's right. That's right.
It
So,
led to a later topic that we might get into.
yeah, we did
but-
have some good discussion at the
That's
table.
But
True.
that won't come for.
And we'll talk about that in a future episode.
That's right.
We'll hold that for another day. But today, if you're watching, now that we're past all of our chit chat,
Yes.
we're going to talk about how we can be good stewards of the earth. And so let's start that topic by asking ourselves a simple question. What is the biblical basis of God's expectation of us being a good steward? So do either one of you want to jump into that, or you want me to use my scriptures that I have?
I think you'll do great to lead us off with Scripture, and then I have one to, I think, add on to that.
Okay, so I'm going to start in Genesis 1, and there are a couple of verses I want to use, verse 29 and 30. God also said, and this is when he's speaking to Adam and Eve in the creation story, God also said, look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant on the surface of the entire earth, and every tree whose fruit contains seed. This will be food for you, for all the wildlife of the earth, for every bird of the sky, and for every creature that crawls on the earth, everything having the breath of life in it. I have given every green plant for food, and it was so. And so from the very beginning, God's expectation was that Adam and Eve would be stewards of his creation. And I think it's interesting that in this particular set of verses, there's a mention of fruits and trees that have seed in them. And that meant there was the potential for future harvest and future crops, but it was going to take their efforts as stewards to make those seeds bear future plants and food sources. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that. The other one I have is in Genesis 2. It's in a similar vein because we get two creation stories, and I've often said in the past, one is kind of a broad overview, and then the second one is more of a zoomed-in version. And so Genesis 2, and I'm going to go to verse 15, and it says, the Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and watch over it. And so again, it's the concept of stewardship. And for me, those are the biblical basis, at least in Genesis, of stewardship. You've got a different one.
Right. Well, I wanted you to start because we sort of get that idea of stewardship and how we're supposed to care for the for the Lord's earth. And that's what I have in Psalm 89:11. The heavens are yours, the earth also is yours. The world and everything in it, you founded them. So we're told that this all belongs to God. And this is just kind of a logical thought. But if this all belongs to God, surely we ought to take care of what he has placed us in. If everything around us belongs to God, then again, that's why I wanted you to start first, is we're told to steward, but it's also just logical. I mean, it's God's creation. Of course, we should care for it because it's his. And we revere him so highly, we hold him so highly that naturally we would want to take care of what he's placed us in.
I think that's very good. The only other thing I wanted to offer as we get started with the biblical basis, and this is just an interesting comment to go back to that idea that I presented a moment ago about the seed being in the plants or the seed being a part of the fruit of the trees. When God was giving instructions about how Israel was to go and fight their enemy nations, they were pretty much to destroy everything in sight except the fruit trees. And again, that has the seed in it. So that was going to give future generations an opportunity to have a food source. So if we go to Deuteronomy 20, verses 19 and 20, here's what it says, and these, again, are instructions or laws about how to handle enemies. When you lay siege to a city for a long time, fighting against it in order to capture it, do not destroy its trees by putting an axe to them, because you can get food from them. Do not cut them down. Are trees of the field human to come under siege by you? But you may destroy the trees that you know that do not produce food. You may cut them down to build a siege works against the city that is waging war against you until it falls. So you could use the non-fruit-bearing trees without seeds as a part of the siege works, but you could not use fruit-bearing trees because that was to be something that was cultivated in future generations. So again, it's the concept of stewardship, even in the law. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about that.
Well, I'm going to add one more thing because I just think it ties in too perfectly.
Okay,
We're just going to go ahead and get all of our scripture out in the beginning.
Yeah, let's do it.
So this is Ephesians chapter 1, verses 8 through 10, and it's kind of starting in the middle of this, but it's about God's rich blessings that he's given to us. And it says that he lavished on us with all wisdom and understanding. He made known to us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure that he planned in him, for the administration of the days of fulfillment, to bring everything together in the Messiah, both things in heaven and things on earth in him. So I just thought these verses pointed out that everything works together. Everything is meant to work together. That's how God designed it to be. And that goes along with what you were saying. I mean, we are dependent on the fruit trees. That's why they were told not to destroy it. So we ought to be careful about what we're doing and how we're caring for things, because God has a plan for all things to work together. And we don't want to come in with our sinfulness and kind of ruin what his plan originally was for us. So
that's good.
That's good.
Now, Tyce, I feel like we're leaving you out.
I know.
No, it's okay.
But why would you say creation is so important? Part of it has to do with what Clark has just revealed to us, that God's going to use everything to accomplish his purposes. Other thoughts about why creation could be so important?
I mean, not only just because God created it for his purposes, but he created it for our purpose too. I mean, he didn't just create a land or the earth with nothing to do, but he put us in it to multiply on it, to cultivate it. And so more than just his ultimate purpose of creation, but through our stewardship and through our development that he has given us, that is part of the reason that we have the creation that we have.
I agree.
totally.
Yeah, because he gave us a work ethic.
He did.
He's a working God. We're to be a working people. So a part of being a steward is activating the work ethic so that those things can be cultivated. So it does have a benefit for us in his economy.
Yeah, I think to Clark's point, when he just talked about how things do work together, you just talked about how the fruit trees, well, the other trees were for the purpose of building things. Now, in this situation, it was siege machines, which some people have different opinions on, but they were still using those resources, that material, for its purpose to build.
That's right.
And so it's still coming to its fulfillment.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
That is good.
So the other reason I would say in my list that creation is so important is that it does declare the glory of God every day for all of humanity. So I'm going to go to Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the expanse proclaims the work of his hands. Day after day they pour out speech. Night after night they communicate knowledge. There is no speech. There are no words. Their voice is not heard. Yet their message has gone out to the whole earth and to the world, and their words to the ends of the world. And so the heavens declare God's glory. All of his creation declares his glory. And I think that's something that ought to cause us to want to take care of God's earth so that the maximum glory can be given to God through creation.
So that's really good.
That is good. I think especially if you look at Job, and this could be a little bit far off of an example, but when we look at God's response to Job and just how little we know about the way the world works, but we do know the general basis of how to take care of it and that we should for God. There's just a sense of that he is greater than it and that he knows the way of the world, and he's just given us that ability to live here and to prosper through it.
And I know highly intelligent doctors and scientists who talk about exactly what you just said. Is there's some famous quote that's like, a little bit of science will disprove the existence of God, and a lot of science will absolutely prove the existence of God. Because you look at how complicated things are, the more our technology increases, the more we can see this. I mean, the amount of atoms and cells in our body, they didn't know that back then whenever the Bible was written. Mm-hmm. But as we discover this, it just declares the work of the Lord. It really does. And Psalm 19 just proves to be true once again.
And I think if we take it one step further, because I know the passages primarily, you used one from Ephesians. Most of the ones I've used to this point are from the Old Testament, but I would like to go to Romans 1:20 and also say that in addition to the creation giving God glory, the creation actually declares the attributes of God, because it says, for his invisible attribute, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen since the creation of the world, being understood through what has been made. As a result, people are without excuse. And so, again, creation has a huge place for all of the things that we've just mentioned, but in addition, it is declaring the need for God and his eternal power, his eternal attributes that would lead us to Jesus. So I think that's kind of important for us to keep in mind. All right, so what about our view of end times? This is kind of what may have generated this whole discussion about being good stewards, because we had a discussion not long ago, the three of us, and Sarab as well, he's here recording, about our view of end times may kind of frame whether we're good stewards or not. Anybody want to dive in on that?
Go ahead if you want.
So I think it does. I think our view of end times impacts it greatly. And this was actually a lesson that I didn't want to teach necessarily in youth because it was a little above my own pay grade, but they asked if we could teach
now explain, you asked the students before the summer to give you questions that you would address during the summer Bible studies, and this was one of them.
Actually, no, this was our Roman study that we did last semester, but they have asked some incredible questions that would be fun table talks at some point, and one of them will be actually. But today this was just Romans, and it was funny that you brought up Romans 1, because Romans 1 and 2 both speak heavily on a redeemed creation. And I was trying to find the verses now, and we might have to go over them in another episode, but or I just encourage the audience to go and check out Romans yourself and read up and go find it. But Romans 1 and 2 do speak on a redeemed creation. And I think that tends to lean, now this is going to be a big word for some of our audience members. Some of them are going to say, I already know it, and some of them are going to want to turn the podcast off after this. But we have amillennial and premillennial, right? And you guys,
post-millennial.
Post-millennial, which I guess I wasn't going to go too much into in this episode, but you guys make sure to.
We may have to come back and have a separate episode to get into that discussion, but.
Yeah, I think it does have a little bit to do with it, though. But go ahead. Get back to your point.
Well, no, that was good. What would you say about amillennial, premillennial, and postmillennial when it refers to creation? How do you think that goes along with it?
So, as far as I don't think I'm prepared for creation, but I do prepare for the activists and how we should steward creation with that. And so I think we see in postmillennialism just the trying to help bring forth the coming of Christ, and we see that the earth gets better and better. I think that's really where activism really started, was with that postmillennialist view, when that was the most popular. Say, we got to not only share the gospel, but we got to prepare the earth for Christ's coming. And so that's when we really got to take care of the earth, got to make sure we're recycling, got to make sure that we're farming correctly. All this stuff started from that postmillennialist view to an extent in the modern world.
Because the world will eventually get better, and the kingdom of God will come and be ushered in by the believers.
In the perspective of a postmillennial.
In a postmillennial
which
view.
Is the exact opposite of a premillennial view, where I'm not going to say everyone that believes premillennial is going to say this, but a general, like if we just run the rabbit trail and look at what it leads to, there's no reason to take care of the earth.
Because there's going to be a total destruction of the earth.
And I mean, the opposite is true. As the earth gets worse and worse, we're going to bring Christ closer. And so we should not take care of the earth, because eventually Christ is going to have to come, and it's going to be when it's bad enough.
I've actually heard some people say that very thing who were had a premillennial view of end times. What difference does it make if we really take care of the earth? Let's just use it, because in the end it will be destroyed, and a new heaven and a new earth will come, and therefore there's no need to really worry about these issues. I've actually heard people say
which I think part of that argument is fair, but we're missing the stewardship part of what we're really called to do while we're on earth, is stewardship.
Right. And I've heard a great perspective from actually the pastor I had growing up. He was Brother Marvin. He's passed now, but he was an incredibly intelligent person, and he believed in premillennialism. He was a premillennialist. But he would always say, my job is to steward the earth. He'd say, if God brings about destruction on the earth, he might do that through global warming, through the pollution that we have, whatever the case might be. That might be how God brings it about. But if it is, there's nothing that we can do to stop that anyway. Mm-hmm. However, I'm told to steward the earth, so that's what I'm going to do. And I thought that was a very respectable position. He would say, I'm just going to hold true to what God has commanded me to do, and he'll handle the rest of it.
And I think most of the premillennial people that I know would probably take the approach that Brother Marvin took. Mm-hmm. It may be destroyed, but in the meantime, we should take care of it as much as we could.
I agree.
And honor God. Going back to Genesis 1, the assignment we were given as humans on the earth. So I can agree with that. It's probably been the few who are extremists in premillennialism that would say, let's just let it go anyway. It doesn't matter. It's going to be destroyed in the end.
Right.
So it's kind of an extreme position of that.
Even so, even though it is the extremists, I think this is a pretty hot topic among people.
I do too.
How we should care for the earth. Because although not everybody says it, I think it is easy to feel that way, which I think is exactly what your question was intended towards.
Right. And if you go with the amillennial view,
yes,
then the thought process is that God is going to redeem the earth in the end. And so if he's planning to redeem it, why not go ahead and be utilizing it in the best way, protecting it to the best of our ability as good stewards.
Right.
And then the redemption process will take place in God's timing, which that's all in his hands anyway. So it is kind of interesting how your end times view may have some impact on your attitude and outlook toward stewardship of the earth.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Now, Tyce, you brought this up, and I had this as a question. Do you think we should be political activists when it comes to this issue?
Yeah.
And your thought about post-millennial views of the end times probably would spur on more political activity, being a political activist.
Yeah, I think so. Me and Brooklyn actually had a conversation about this last night. And I think the more we become activists, I think we lose sight of the other things that we should steward. And if we are just going to be throwing all of our money into this problem, for a problem that we aren't going to be able to control, but at the end of the day, like, we can do things to help, but we're never going to go back to a time where, early Romans, where there's no carbon emission. Like, they were just going out and breathing the freshest air. Like, we're not going to have that. And so to throw our money at things like this, or to be overly involved, you're missing sight of other stewardship aspects. But, as far as what Christians should do, I think we should be pushing more than someone who's not a Christian for the care of God's earth.
Yeah. I agree. I'm not one that would say we should be political activists in any way because of what you just said. There's a balance to what's most important, and sharing the gospel, making disciples, building the church, and advancing the kingdom. Those are the priorities.
Yeah.
And being a political activist for these issues would be way down the list for me personally.
Yeah.
So now I do think, though, Jesus had some thoughts about creation himself. Now, he's God in the flesh, so naturally he understands it better than anybody. He
That's
created
right.
it. And the book of Colossians, chapter 1, 15 to 22, are clear that Jesus was at creation. So, but the couple of thoughts I wanted to say, and y'all can bounce off of this if you'd like to, is that Jesus actually used creation as a mechanism to talk about the kingdom. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. When you go to Matthew 6 in the Sermon on the Mount, and he talks about anxiety and he talks about worry, he uses illustrations about the kingdom from creation itself. Consider the ravens and consider the wildflowers. And both of those were used by Jesus to further help us understand that our Father is trustworthy and will be faithful to us, and we are far more valuable than the things of creation. But he used creation as his mechanism to communicate that point. And then in Mark chapter 11, verses 12 through 14, as he's entering the city of Jerusalem, he curses a fig tree that has leaves but no fruit. And it was a reminder, because they come back a few days later, and that tree has withered, and the disciples are very confused about that. But it was an illustration to say that Israel looks like the part, but there's no fruit in Israel. And the day of the old covenant has come to an end, and the new covenant is being issued in. So Jesus used creation as a mechanism to introduce the kingdom and talk about the kingdom. And so he had a high view of creation himself.
He did.
So any thoughts on that? Those are just some random thoughts I had put on my paper.
I think to that point too, I don't want to discredit it. That's not why I'm going to bring this up. But he was also talking to farmers. I mean,
Yes, he was.
talking to farmers and fishermen who are probably most in tune with creation out of anyone. And so what better way to do it than do? And so I think we do have a lot of examples of creation because of not only him being the creator, but who he was talking to.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And the fig tree would have had huge significance for the Israelites, because if you were thinking about God, you would sit under a fig tree.
Yeah.
And so that was very important. So for
Is that
him,
where Philip was when?
well, it's where Nathaniel
Yes.
was located when he was called to be a disciple, and it was the discussion point that Jesus used to say, I saw you sitting under the fig tree, so I know you were thinking about God. Now I'm going to tell you what you really need to know as you're thinking about him. So the fig tree has a really significant connection to the nation of Israel, and they should have seen it even more as we've got the leaves, but we don't have the fruit, and we're not pleasing to God. So all of that's there.
Right.
Okay, so last question, and Clark, I think this is where you wanted to really dive in. You wanted to talk a little bit at the end about how we can practically, as individuals, without being a political activist, be good stewards. So, and then Tyce, you may have some thoughts too, but Clark, I know you had a little list going.
Yes, and I won't take too long because I know we're already running out of time here on the episode. But as much as I'm not going to encourage you to be a political activist, I do think that God has given each of us passions. He's given each of us a unique way to share the gospel. A quote I saw recently was, you were reborn to do evangelism. So it's not that you were born to do evangelism, but you were reborn to do evangelism. And I thought that was pretty funny. But we all have a context, and we all have people that we can reach. So if farming or if taking care of the earth, whatever it might be, is something that you're passionate about, you can share that with other people. And in doing so, do the sort of the more important things like you were talking about, like sharing the gospel, caring for people, and that kind of thing. But just for the average person, if that's not your thing, if farming is not your passion, or taking care of the earth or whatever, I did have a few points. And one is just very simple. Be careful about the litter that you take. Stop littering. I mean, it's such a simple point. But
that is a simple one that a lot of people need to hear.
Yes, I agree. And I almost even sound silly saying it, because it's like, oh, of course. But I just think, even for people that I know.
Yeah, I was going to say, my wife and I have been behind at least 2 or 3 cars in the last year or so where you could just tell they had been to a fast food restaurant, and when they finished, they just rolled their window down, threw it outside, and it went flying.
Yeah. And
it was all I could do to keep her from grabbing the wheel and mashing the gas pedal and bumping them, so we could have a conversation about it in person. But
right.
Anyway.
So hold your garbage till you get to a garbage can. That's one thing. You can go plant a garden if that's your thing. I know for you, Pastor Scott, that wouldn't
I'm not
be,
a gardener, but that's okay.
But
I
if that's
love the
your
gardening,
thing,
the outcomes of the garden.
Yes,
butter
that's
beans,
right.
peas. I like all that.
And I would say, go and seek recycling. I know in Starkville it's a little bit more difficult, but if you can, just save up your plastics for a while, or save your aluminum cans, whatever it might be. I would say even to use less plastics too. That's something I try to be careful of, because the reality is, I don't know how much of an impact I'm making, but so much plastic waste does go into the oceans. It does go into just a lot of the creation that the Lord has given us. So just very simple things. I know I'm sounding like an activist now, but it's truly so simple. And I'm not going to tell you to do these things because of the reasons that they're saying. Our reason is to take care of the creation that God has given us. And my final thing is exactly what you talked about a minute ago, actually. It's just to ponder on creation, to think about creation. Go outside and look at how the heavens declare the glory of the Lord. And in doing that, I think you can have a much bigger appreciation of creation, and it will cause you to want to litter less and use less pollution and all these things.
I would say, Tyce, you can chime in on this. You in Brooklyn like to camp.
We love to camp, love to hike. I was about to get into that.
Okay,
go ahead.
No, you talk about it.
I was just going to say, man, there's something about when you're out camping or you hit the lookout point of a hike and you just see what creation is, because it's not affected by man. Like, there's something about seeing a city skyline. Like, you see the city in the distance, and that's beautiful, but that is man's creation that God has given the ideas, but untouched by God, there is just something that just, I don't know, gets me and Brooklyn going when we see that. And it just really does make you think, like, man, this Cheez-It wrapper that's sitting right next to me, I mean, I can't see that. Like, if I left that here, someone would be able to see that in the distance somewhere else. And so, I mean, it really gets you.
Oh, I was going to say, just to add to your list, Clark, camping can be one of those practical suggestions. I don't really care to camp. Camping is going to the Holiday Inn for me, but I know y'all like to camp.
Yes.
So I thought that might be another practical way is you could take your children camping, and that reminds them of the creation and what God's done in giving that to us.
Totally.
It is harder here in Mississippi because there's a chance where you hate creation because of how hot it is down here. You might want to go. You might want to go northern to camp.
Plus, we have a lot of fire ants.
We do.
Oh, yeah.
So it is more difficult probably to camp.
Sometimes I do want to just like throw that Cheez-It wrapper over the fire ant hill. Not with them, but.
So, any other thoughts you had, Clark?
That's all
we kind
I
of cut
had.
you off with the camping stories.
No. That's all I had. I just want us to all be mindful, and again, not for the reasons that most of these activists are going to tell us, but do these things because we care for the creation that God has given us, because we care to take care of other people seeing this and other people seeing it, and then realizing this is the glory of the Lord.
So, our participation in stewardship is not about politics. Our participation is about the Creator.
100%.
That's the best way I could say it.
Well, you just said it extremely well.
Okay. Well, thanks. Well, thank you guys for the topic today. And we hope you've enjoyed watching today's Table Talks. And it's hopefully given you some food for thought and discussion points for people you know. We hope you'll have a great week and come back and join us for the next Table Talks.